Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 3, Episode 3. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Well, in this episode, we've got a great feature guest, Drew Green, CEO of menswear retailer Indochino. And as you'll hear, I've known Drew for about 20 years, various roles. It was super great to catch up with him and explore their retail strategy today and moving forward. Steve, you actually, when we put together a list of folks we wanted to interview way back, Drew and Indochino were already on that list, right?
Yeah, I think Indochino's a really fascinating brand. Certainly one of these so-called digitally native vertical brands that have come on the scene and gotten into physical retail, really more in a showroom format. But, controlling manufacturing and doing more custom menswear is a pretty interesting space, much more affordable price points. And as we'll talk about, doing some interesting new partnerships.
Well, what I thought is always think is interesting about Indochino is yes, they do this kind of make to build kind of democratization of men's fashion, but also that they had showroom. They started as a pureplay.com, but then when Drew took over, he said, "Listen, we're never going to grow the way we need to grow," and opened up. Hey, guess what? Stores. And now the stores are a bit different. They're more showrooms where you go in and you get fitted, which is another big advantage, right? Because in the before time. And in this context, I mean, before they had stores, listen, it's tough to measure yourself, right? And they were having a heck of a time, not making the suits, but having the suits fit better. So they solved for that. And then they, not only did they open up a few stores, but they opened up dozens and dozens and in very prestigious malls. I thought both
great real estate.
contexts are really, really interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, oh, wow, you're going into the very premier mall who's with a very unconventional leasing agreement, I'm sure, right? Because, had asked the products aren't moving back and forth. So anyway, interesting for a whole bunch of reasons, right? Before we jump in, I wanted to remind everyone that we have a YouTube channel. So check us out, Remarkable Retail on YouTube. And not all of our interviews are there, but a lot of our discussion and pre-discussion. And what we're about to jump into now, which is what's caught your eye, caught your interest in the past couple of weeks. In terms of retail news, and then we'll get to our interview with Drew.
A few things, a couple that are part of what I've started to somewhat cheekily, if that's a word, refer to as the big moderation. We made it. Hashtag great moderation.
I love that.
Is the big decline in grocery. As I'm sure most people will know, grocery really grew disproportionately during the peak of the COVID times, mainly in substitution from eating out. So, but we've actually seen a decline in online grocery pretty significantly. Now, some of that is probably the shift back to eating out, but certainly it seems like mostly customers are getting much more comfortable going to the store. One of the things that was interesting underneath the numbers, so when you think about online grocery, you really have three kinds. You've got essentially curbside pickup, you've got shipped to home through the mail, and then you've got local home delivery. So it was the home delivery and the ship to home that was down the most. The curbside pickup part continues to grow. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. And we'll see how this continues to develop.
I mean, there's a bunch of interesting threads to pull on that. So first of all, it's I guess probably no surprise to you that the pace of online growth in many things would ebb off as stores started to open and our lives started to return to normal. I mean, I know speaking to grocers, they're seeing the basket sizes come down, but the trips go up, which is kind of a more normal behavior. Go more often, buy less stuff, buy what you need, closer to what you need. The footfall has gone up, not down, and that's now families. I mean, that's not necessarily more trips. That's I'm going now with my wife or I'm going with the kids, and people are feeling more comfortable about that. Interesting on the Canadian side of the border, Loblaw, which is the biggest grocer in the country, big grocer, even in global context, is now doing a big strategic review of all their initiatives. Galen Weston's coming back as the CEO. Not unusual in and of itself, but one of the first things they cut was meal kits. And you and I were talking off mic. hey, if a big grocer can't succeed at meal kits because customer
Yeah,
acquisition is a bit easier and all these, who
yeah,
the hell can, right?
yeah, yeah. No, and I certainly don't understand all the economics behind it, but I was actually pretty optimistic about meal kits working for groceries, and doesn't seem to be the case. So
Yeah, they're not the only one. And again, in the Canadian side of the border, Metro bought a meal kit company. Metro's the third largest grocer. They bought a meal kit company, and then a year and a half later sold it. Longo's great regional grocer
mhm.
thought, let's try it in store and let's do something different. They had a business called Grocery Gateway to deliver it. Never
Mm.
really just panned out. They tried different
Yeah,
things, which is what grocers are great at. How about you assemble your own meal kit? Here's an area of the store to assemble your own meal
right.
kit. I think the value proposition is there. There's a there, right?
Seems
People
like it.
want to cook. I mean, it intuitively makes sense to
Or
me
feel
that
like they're
people want to.
cooking.
Right. I mean, but you are cooking. People are more like to cook their meals. Maybe they're a little less. Geez, I don't want to just go figure out what I'm gonna make. I just pull it all together and enjoy the
Right.
experience. So anyway, I think there's a there, but I don't think you know. I don't think it's not a linear progression in any way,
No,
shape, or
apparently not.
form.
Apparently not.
Let's talk about UPS. So you flagged
Yeah.
that you were looking at the UPS numbers. Tell me about that.
Well, this is another potential clue to the moderation we're seeing in e-commerce overall. So UPS reported in their quarterly earnings that their parcel deliveries were down. I think it was about 2.9% year over year. The deliveries to homes were down in the teens, whereas deliveries to businesses were up. Now,
Hmm.
it's a little bit hard to tell because UPS is obviously not the only provider of delivery services.
Yeah.
So there may be a little bit of a mix issue. They did cut back on some of their smaller business customers because of the capacity issues they had and were favoring bigger
Yeah.
customers. So it's a little bit hard to say this directly correlates to what's going on with e-commerce overall. But I think when we take this together with some of the data we've seen on e-commerce growth starting to moderate, kind of paints that picture where a little bit of a regression to the mean, I suppose.
I like your point about the mix because knowing what I know about packaging companies, and you and I live in retail world, but there are other worlds, if you can imagine, outside retail world. Um,
What?
you know, the yeah, I know.
What
These
else?
couriers, well, medical supplies to the home are going up
Hmm.
geometrically.
Yeah.
Business to business transfers. So I think again, your point about the mix issue is really germane because I think they and I read that UPS had kind of dropped thousands of small clients, not a
Yeah.
few, and it was
Yeah.
less about capacity and more about profitability in the mix.
Hmm.
In other words, we'll make more money delivering home-based medical supplies than delivering and trying to get it to the doorstep for other retailers. And I think we're
Right.
seeing that across the board. So as you say, it's a not a simple linear equation. This drops meaning this, but I
Yeah.
think, as you said, the great moderation means maybe they're thinking, hey, okay, if this isn't going to keep growing the way we thought, let's not build that other hub. Let's just shift the mix, right, of who and
Yeah. And
and what we shift.
I think if we want to tie the online grocery story with this, I mean, I think there's a lot of
Mm,
recalibration that's going on the part of all retailers as they see certain parts of their business come back more strongly, others that perhaps were distorted or maybe very COVID specific starting to drop off. So some of this I think is a natural evolution.
yeah,
But obviously we're a lot of factors are still in play at the moment.
yeah, yeah. So it's not a small world after all. Disney skedaddles out of Canada. Now,
Yeah.
this is not new news, I don't think, to the industry. They announced they were getting out of stores. You and I spoke on it back in
Right.
season 2, and it's a bit of a head scratcher for both of us.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts? I mean, it's just kind of the final. Okay, let's close it all up. I predict 18 months from today they'll announce a big flagship strategy where they get back into retail. Never say never on any of this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah. I feel this is like kind of wiping the slate clean and preparing for a reload. I mean, it's just hard for me to
Mm,
imagine that a company like Disney doesn't have some sort of significant, and not 1,000 stores, but material
right.
flagship
Yeah.
and premium mall or some kind of
Sure.
strategy that can work. So I think it's a do over reset button. But yeah, I suspect we'll see some activity on this in the not too distant future.
Listen, I remember from my kids, and I've been to Disney a couple of times. My wife's sister actually worked there in Florida, so we went a couple of times. And there's not a lot of kids by the numbers get to go, and it's
Yeah,
such a great opportunity for Disney to extend their
right.
brand in a retail context, and not just. I mean, some of the
Yeah,
local stores here were pack them high and watch them fly, like
right.
basically
Yeah,
end aisles of dolls. There's not
yeah,
much experience to it, right?
yeah. It's just
I
sort of
think
an
that was a
edited
miss.
Toys R Us kind of. Yeah, yeah. I agree.
Yeah, but when when you got in there with looking through your kids' eyes, they were excited, right? It's Disney stuff, the stuff they were watching. Like there's
Yeah,
opportunity out the
yeah. They've
yin
got
yang for this, right?
so many media properties, so many characters. It's a constant
Sure.
stream of content, and trying to marry that
Yep.
together just seems like an
Yeah.
obvious thing to do. So yeah, I suspect
Yeah.
they'll be back. And then we've got another story of potential withdrawal of stores, not closing them all down. Is Tesla? There's a report that Tesla
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
going to be pulling their stores from the malls they're in. Tesla's kind of it. Their whole retail strategy has been interesting to me because you might
Mm.
remember probably a couple of years ago, they actually announced, or it may have been just Elon Musk blurting out on Twitter or something, that they were going to close all their retail locations.
I remember.
And
I remember.
that seemed very bizarre to me.
Huh.
Obviously, Tesla's got a very different showroom strategy than your typical auto retailer, but it still seemed like you needed a place to go see the car and maybe talk to a salesperson. At least some people would
Yeah.
want to do that. So they quickly reversed course on that and looked like they were holding pretty steady for a while here. But now it looks like they're thinking about getting out of some of these high dollar places and perhaps doing something that is not only lower cost, but maybe a little bit different in terms of maybe combining with service or some other things. So the story is
Yeah.
not that clear exactly about what's next, but not good news for some of these malls because Tesla is certainly
Yeah.
a high profile tenant. I don't know if they draw a ton of traffic, but they certainly have a certain panache,
They
if I
they
could say it that way.
they do draw a lot of traffic, and in fact, on a dollar per square foot, I know talking to some mall owners, they were the highest performing stores. Of course,
Oh,
one
really?
car, sell a
Well,
car a
yeah,
day, you
right,
got 40, 50,
right.
60, $100,000.
Yeah,
You've
right.
now got your biggest selling per square foot.
Yeah,
What's interesting about it, Elon Musk says this, then he says that. He walks stuff back and forth all the
right.
time.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're looking at Genesis. The Hyundai, I think it's a Hyundai premium car, Genesis.
Yeah,
And Genesis is sold, they come to you. You call them up and
right.
they roll the car to your door, uh, show it to you in your driveway, take you for the test drive. There's no stores. And maybe there's a there too, right? It's like, I don't really
Yeah.
need to go to a shopping mall to experience it. But that being said, how does it drive demand? Like, you've got to do a lot of work for me to pick up the phone or fill out a form and get a Genesis car to my doorstep, right? Already you're
Yeah,
feeling
it's
obligated. Like, do I want a car sales guy in my driveway? No.
right, right. Yeah, I suspect some of it with Tesla is that when they first built these stores, I think they were, much more advertising, establishing the brand.
Yeah.
Customers
Yeah.
didn't really know. They introduced quite a few models over the last 5, 6 years. And so maybe they felt like they needed that mall traffic to kind of validate the brand as well as really expose the brand. But now they've got so much awareness and interest, and particularly in a time where, of course, I mean, this won't last forever, but cars are in short supply. Maybe they figure, okay, we can be in a cheaper place, do some different things, and customers are going to come to us. And but we'll see. We'll see ultimately
I don't
how
know.
quickly they go. And but not good news from all owners if this is largely true.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it does drive traffic. I mean, it was an exciting place to go, and it's an interesting thing to look at, right? Even if you're not considering buying one, it's a not unfun thing to do. All right, well, listen, let's pivot from here and get to our great interview with Drew Green, CEO of Indochino, and let's kick that off now. Right. All right, well, that was a great episode, a great interview with Drew Green, and if you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast platform so you can catch up with us on all our interviews and insights. New episodes will show up every week, particularly if you're subscribed. And be sure and check out our new YouTube channel, Remarkable Retail.
I'm Steve Dennis. The expanded and completely revised second edition of my best-selling book, Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption is available just about everywhere books are sold, including Amazon, Indigo, and bookshop.org.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host of the Voice of Retail podcast and a bunch of other stuff. And you can learn about me on LinkedIn or meleblanc.co. Steve, have a great week and be safe.
Gonna try. Thanks.